Hi, and welcome to Fork in the Road. Rusty Gaylord here, and I'm your host. Fork in the Road is a conversation about the decisions that we take in life and how we get from here to there. Most of us, when we meet people in our lives, we see them where they are at that point in their lives, and we don't always know the backstory. But all of us have a backstory. All of us have a path that we followed to get to where we are in life today. And it's a great opportunity to meet people who are successful, accomplished, doing great things in the world, and understand a little bit of that backstory. Where do they come from and how did they get here? I'm happy to have David Taylor-Klaus on with me today. DTK is a great guy and a friend of mine. Happy to count him amongst my friends and a fellow coach. And he helps people to create a shift in their life. Now, a lot of people have a sense that they want to shift, but not everybody knows what kind of shift they want. So that's what DTK does. He works with people to help them identify that shift and then to make it. One of the shifts that he does is to help reintroduce successful entrepreneurs to their families, because we all know how consuming work can be. So welcome, DTK. Happy to have you with us today.
Glad to be here. Excited to see where this goes.
Yes, cool. Well, hey, we were chatting just before going live here, and you were saying that you're on Act 3 of your life. And maybe you can tell us a little bit about what those first couple acts were and how you navigated that change, because they're at least from listening from the outside, it's not immediately clear that one leads to the next, but you made those transitions. So love to have you share a little bit of that story with us.
Yeah, I guess, 2 and 3 might, let's just say, I'm not exactly sure how they link. They do, the dots connect when you look backwards, not forwards, right? So I started in hospitality at 15. I loved the idea of food and food service, hotels, restaurants. I got into it because it was an easy way to make money, because I created some damage and had to pay to repair it. And so working in a restaurant was the easiest way to make money quickly. But I fell in love with it. And for the next 11 years, I went from working in the back of the house, working as a waiter, moving through management up to captain in one of the largest restaurants in the United States in Washington, D.C. at the time. Captain in white tablecloth in the 80s in DC. It was fabulous right up until the first fiscal readjustment we had in October of 87, when the market crashed. The industry tanked, the restaurant closed, and I was like, great, now what? So first, instead of interviewing in jeans and a t-shirt for a white tablecloth job, I interviewed in a shirt and a tie as a restaurant consultant. Because I said, hey, look, if there are 50 ways you can screw this up in the first year and I can help you avoid 25 of them, you can't pay me enough. And so for the next several years before I went back to school, I got paid as a restaurant consultant. I created that next. After I got out of school, I realized I wanted something a little less fickle than hospitality. So thinking I had discovered it, I went into technology. I took another one of my passions and turned it into a career, a profession, and spent several years doing network consulting, helping ad agencies, marcom groups, PR firms get the computers to talk to each other. It was always from a human side, though. So the silicon had to serve the carbon instead of the other way around. And after several years of that, our clients started coming to us and saying, what's this whole internet thing we keep hearing about? So in fourth quarter of 95, I started teaching people what the internet was so I could sell them a website. And then as soon as I sold the first website, I was like, oh crap. So I spent the next 3 days learning how to code. And then my partner and I started building websites. So after 14 years and a ton of reinventions through the end of the 90s and through the 2000s, I sold my company to my partner and went full-time into entrepreneur and executive coaching. I spent the last 15 months as a CEO in a technology company, also coaching. So I was splitting between the two, and it was exhausting. So it was time for me to go on my own.
It sounds like there is a theme there. I mean, the restaurant consultant, right? When you were doing that, and then you at the end of that phase, that's where you brought it at the end of that hospitality phase. That's when you went into the consulting. And at the end of the technology phase, you started to then bring in the coaching or consulting. But it's not necessarily an obvious transition from technology to coaching. And, you were trying to do both, and it was tiring, and you're starting a new business. Like, how did you know when is the right time to make that change?
So a friend of mine, Alexis Arton, a coach out in California, says that you can pay attention when the universe whispers in your ear, or you can wait till you get hit across the forehead with a baseball bat. It's your call. And I waited for the baseball bat. I had gotten so caught up in leading the company I thought I should be leading, and building the team I thought I should be building, and running the company the way I thought I should be, and doing what I thought I was shitting all over myself. And I had gotten totally disconnected from what was real and true and important for me. And in August of 2005, I had gone into a depression spiral, and I was suicidal. And I knew that I had to shift something. I knew that I had to change, because what I was creating through that company was not the shift that I was here as a human and as an entrepreneur to create. And that dissonance was unhinging. And it took me 4 years to get to recover, get me back, and decide how it is, what's the shift that I wanted to create, and how I was going to do it. And that last year, there's the last 15 months where I had, as you can tell from the story before, I was never trained in anything that I was getting paid to do. The training that I was going to learn how to coach, go through the training and the certification before I coached the first person. And then I walked into the first training weekend, and they said, hey, by the way, you have to have a practice client tomorrow night. I was like, shit. So my plan went to pot at that point. But I was finding my legs as a coach, and I was lucky enough to get some advice early on, not just to coach anyone, to sharpen your sword, but figure out who it is that you want to serve and only coach them, so that as you're sharpening your sword, as you're learning the trade and honing your craft, you're doing it with people who inspire you and light you up, and the work moves you as much as it shifts them. So that's what those first 15 months were spent doing.
Yeah, that's good. I like that idea of being clear on what who you're targeting, who you're working with, and investing your time and energy on that, which is, tied back to this idea of, what is the shift that you're making in not only in your own life, but in the world. And one of the ways I think about that is that most of us identify very strongly with our careers. Whether you're a coach, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're running a business, or you're just working in a business, most of us identify with our work, right? It's one of the first things you ask someone when you meet them. Oh, what do you do? And so it just becomes part of our identity.
It's one of the first things that North Americans do when they meet someone.
That's true.
That's not a global commonality.
That is true. But since we're both in North America, I'm using that as our frame of reference.
Yeah. But that's something to pay attention to, because that's part of our acculturation, and that's not a personal choice, and it's not something that serves us. The reason so many of us get stuck in an act is because we're tying our self-worth, self-esteem, self-value, self-everything. We're tying ourselves to the success in that role or of that company. And that's terrible. That's dangerous, because we are not what we do by any stretch. Who we are may show up in the professions that we choose, but when it's driven by who we are, who we be at our core, oh my God, that's when it's important.
Well, and that exactly. And I think that many of us look outside in to develop that sense of self-worth and identity and all of that, right? Well, this is the job I do, and it's who I am, and my success in that external world, in that job, is my success as a person. And what you're talking about is turning that around and saying, who am I as a person? What kind of shift am I making in the world as a person? What's important to me? And then doing work that reflects that. And I think that, that's some of what I'm hearing. And as you're talking about is like finding out why am I here? What am I trying to add to this great experiment of life on the planet? And what's unique to me, and how can I explore that and bring more of that to the world through the existing work I'm doing, or if necessary, to shift and do something else?
Like, personally, I believe that we are all here to leave this place better than we found it. And each of us has a different definition of what better than we found it looks like. We are all here to create a shift. The lucky ones have taken the time or had the opportunity to figure out what that is. And if you're an entrepreneur, you damn well better know what that is. Otherwise, you're just tilting at windmills, burning energy unnecessarily. And that's a reason why you're so unhappy and feeling that dissonance. It's important. By the way, it's just as critical for organizations to understand that, to understand why they're special, not what the vision, mission, and values, the stuff that's etched on the wall. It's generally meaningless, because what they can't tell you is why that company is special, why it exists, what it's there to do and to create. And without being able to articulate that, these are the companies that we see with flat culture, flat growth, just meh, right? And that's usually because the people sitting around the table in the C-suite don't know why they're here. And by the way, it sucks when you bring that to work, because that's what flattens culture. It's toxic when you bring it home, which incidentally is why I do what I do.
Well, let's explore that a little bit more, because I think there's this idea for so many people that you have to put on your corporate armor or your professional personality or whatever. Like, so many people think they have a work personality and then their real personality. And I think what you're getting to is when, if you carry that to the extreme, that's when you get these kind of flat feelings where everyone's sitting around in this kind of quote unquote rational discussion about what is the right next move and the strategy for this business and who are they and all of that. But it's very flat because there's no emotion in it. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think one of the most brilliant things to ever come out of Tony Robbins' mouth is that success without fulfillment is failure. And what happens when we armor up is that the wins that we get, you can never really have enough of what you don't really need. So you keep racking up these wins and these promotions, and you end up, oh my God, I think the best way to describe it is you get to the top of the ladder only to realize you've had the ladder up against the wrong wall. None of it is giving you the emotional reward that you want and that you crave. And that's what happens when you go to work wearing armor, because it becomes performative. It's no longer about you and what moves you. It's about what you think or you're being told serves the organization. And an organization is nothing but an agreed upon fiction. It has no heart or soul. The culture is determined by the humans that are there. And if the humans there are all armored up, they're not being humans, they're playing cogs. There's no emotion or soul in a cog. And so organizations are better, teams function better when we bring our full self to that job. And if it's a company that doesn't want your full self there, then that's either the deal that you have to be comfortable making or find somewhere else.
Well, so one of the things we were chatting about earlier was this idea of chapters, right? It's like, well, I'm on chapter 1 of my life or chapter 2 of my life or chapter 3. And, I think one of the, and the gold watch phenomenon, right? This idea that, at some point you're going to reach the end of your career, you'll get the gold watch, literally or metaphorically, and you'll sail off into the sunset, and the rest of your life will be bliss and martinis on the beach and, all of that. But, I think that creates this expectation that you have to work hard now, that you've got to kind of suck it up. You've got to be that corporate warrior now, or business warrior, however, whether small business or big corporation, until you get the gold watch. But, this idea of having multiple chapters and multiple stages of life, it can create a little bit more flexibility around that. So, as someone who's now in your 3rd chapter, how do you think about that?
So there's a neat stat that I heard when our youngest child is high school class of 18, right? So when he graduated in one of the information sessions, turns out at the school where he eventually went anyway, what they said was the kids in this graduating class are expected to have 7 different careers, not 7 different jobs, 7 different careers, and 4 of them don't exist yet.
I love that.
First of all, I owned a web company for 14 years. And Tim Berners-Lee hadn't even presented HTML when I graduated from college. So none of that industry existed at all. And even coaching as it looks like now looked nothing like it did years ago when I graduated. And I think it's important to realize that the humans that we're sending out into the world are going to have multiple chapters. By the way, this is not my last chapter. I don't know what it'll be next. My wife and I, we don't talk about retirement. We talk about rewirement. We'll do something different later. I'm not going to be doing this until I stop working. I don't know if I'll stop working. The way I work will look different as I go. And I think it's important that as we raise the humans, we raise the adults that are in our house that just happen to be children while they're here. It's important that we help them understand this is not picking what you're going to do until you stop working. Kids that are in high school now are likely to live to close to 120 or more years. The idea that they would be doing the same thing or the same job would even exist is insane. So having that gold watch mentality of you've got to make whatever chapter you're in right now work because you're going to be doing this forever. The unspoken, unwritten rules that percolate in the background are screwing us up. And we end up feeling trapped when we have endless opportunity to change.
Did you know that as you navigated some of these transition points in your own life? And if so, how do you remember it? Because there's a difference between knowing something, right? I know that intellectually. That makes sense to me, right? Like when I was in college, what we're doing today, having a video conversation, broadcasting that live, this was impossible. Like that didn't exist.
It's not a thing, right?
But knowing that is different from applying it in your life. So I'm curious if, as you have gone through these transitions in your own life, how did you navigate that? There's always some uncertainty around it because it's like, oh man, I'm leaving what I know and I'm stepping into what I don't know. That's uncomfortable. So I'm curious, how did you navigate that?
Well, I didn't know it for a very long time. And everything I was doing felt like life or death. If I got fired, that was the end. I would never get hired again. If it was a terrible parenting day, oh my God, my kid's going to end up being an axe murderer or living in my basement. I mean, all of it was life or death because I was not aware. I wasn't paying attention to the bigger context. And it was exhausting, right? Thankfully, my business partner in the tech company, she and I were we had decided we were going to stop. We were going to end that company's run. And we were looking for a way to architect that, making sure the employees were handled and the clients were handled. We were starting that process. And she kept getting stuck in the place of, well, I don't have the luxury of figuring out what I want to do next. I figured out what I wanted to do next. So there was some angst in the partnership at that. And then when she finally figured out what she wanted to do, she said, I want to run this company and I want to run it without you. But I had already been able to separate myself from the company. And I don't mean, 1 foot out the door. I mean, the company, whether it soared or tanked, was not an indication of my success or failure as a human, as a person, as a leader, right? So it's when we don't separate ourselves and our self-worth and our self-identity from what we're doing, it's hard to leave it. And I think when we start looking at what is it that I want to do next until it no longer serves, it's a different way of exploring it. So now that's how I look at things, even if it's a project, an initiative, a program, a group. Don't get me wrong. I launched something in 2021 and it's like I threw a party and nobody showed up. Like nobody signed up for something that I was putting out there. And I was destroyed for a couple of days. I got caught up in the holy crap, I suck. What am I doing? I can't believe, I mapped the failure of that program or that initiative onto me. And it took me a while to re-separate from it. And I think it's important to remember that there are lots of things that we're going to do that fail. In fact, the more things we do that fail, the better our successes become, right? Rusty, you're going to have to help me remember who said this, but it was, if you want to increase your success, you have to increase your rate of failure.
Oh, I don't know who said that, but I love it.
I want to say it was attributed to Edison. I don't know. It probably didn't belong to whoever it's attributed to. But that idea of, all these companies that say we're built on innovation, it's part of our DNA, but then they punish failure.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't match. And I think, we have cultural messages that say, if you fail, you die, overstating it on purpose. But we have cultural messages that say, if you fail, you die. And so we'll do anything to not fail and not be wrong. And that hampers our ability to learn and grow.
Yeah.
So long answer to your question of how do you keep it present? You have to actively keep it present. Actively hold on to that concept of, I'm separate from what it is that I do. And if there's something else that serves me better, that's what I'm doing next.
Well, and I love that, even someone who's been practicing this and who teaches it and helps others to do it, you can still fall in that hole, right? We all can. It's like, I think that's the truth of this journey of life, is that none of us we never arrive until your toes up at the very end.
Right.
So, there's all sorts of imperfection along the way, but we get better and better. So DTK, this is great. We could talk about this stuff all day, I know. But I want to just wrap up with how people can get in touch with you. And if they found this inspiring and interesting, what's the best way to reach out and connect with you?
Look, there are two easy ways to do it. One is dtkcoaching.com. It's my initials. You see it on the screen in front of you. dtkcoaching.com has information about me, a lot of the stuff I've written, a lot of the videos that are out there. There's also something that I've been playing with for a while. It's at dtkquiz.com. It's something that I created that helped me focus on living, loving, and leading at my best. And I built it into a quiz. It's a fun way for you to figure out how you're doing along that road as well. So enjoy.
dtkcoaching.com and dtkquiz.com. And I am going to be heading over there to take the quiz because I'm fascinated. Thank you so much, DTK. This is a great conversation.
My pleasure. Thanks for letting me play today.